G'day, g'day, g'day. Mathematical KM here. Remember, their initials, not a title. Keith Malumbi. This is round 4 of the round robin. On my Monday club, we were having that tournament. I'm playing Nivin. Nivin's 1530 to my 1430, so about 100 points uphill. Got a little bit of history between us. He has, this is him, beaten me with the white pieces and lost with the black pieces, and so therefore the reverse for me. I've had a win with white and a loss with black. So let's take a look, and by the by, I think both of those games were pre the year of the hippo. So we'll see how that goes for us. Let's get that down a bit and put this into the review. My picture up, and away we go. So he's starting with pretty standard e4. Very normal moves so far from the white player, and bang, we've gone for a 3-pawn centre on the queen side. Now I know that you can play the hippo against this. It's a tricky one, but it's not as tricky as the 3-pawn on the king side. It's interesting that bishop g4 is just playing normal chess and different opening, not the hippo. Knight to f6 is, I believe, coming into Tiger's modern against this setup, and e5 is also a modern defence approach. And I do think that with the hippo, that Solomon, and I'll put his link to his chess course in the comments. Usually it's a knight here, but if pawn comes forward, takes, interesting, takes, and it ends up even, but I think I lose my rights for castling. So instead of going that way, I've gone with the b pawn first. Just a bit more clamping on that c5 square. He brings the knight out behind his centre, that's fairly standard. Completing my development with the pawn structure. He's bringing out a bishop, so he's got a knight and a bishop protecting the d-pawn. Fianchetto. Okay, the alarm, well, it's not an alarm, but the klaxon sound when you get the battery. It's h6. Not even in the top moves, but it is for us hippo players. We're a different breed. Okay, and that gives him a knight and a bishop protecting the e-pawn. We bring knights into the middle. He starts swinging that knight. Now we've got the full thick-skinned hippo in a way. Watch Solomon's courses. The a6 and h6 moves are not played when your opponent has a pawn on c4 or f4. Defeats the purpose of that. So we've got our full setup. And so now we're taking a look at the middle two, rare. And that one's not going to be a goer in this particular setup because we don't have the a6 pawn. So there are all the pawn breaks. But, and I will say this much, that when you're at the 3-pawn centre, it's almost a recommendation to attack the outside pawn, which is a central pawn. So that would be attacking the e-pawn. So one of the options would be f5. It's interesting that the computer likes the e5 push. Twice. But, and these are also potential starting hippo moves after the full setup at the breather moment. And it's often aimed at trying to swap off one of your opponent's bishops for a knight. And in this particular case, the knight to f6 is the top move. And it's giving us 2 pieces on that e-pawn. But really, we're almost thinking we're going to provoke the e-pawn forward and get our knight out to g4. And we're looking to get that dark bishop. So how do we go? We play the knight there. Now that's an interesting move. It wasn't, but like we still haven't taken any space, and the typical minus about 0.8 before you do anything. Well, that's gone. It's already 0.2 to black. And the top move is the planned move of knight to g4. Looking to swap off that dark bishop. If he does move it, then we can trap it there. So what does he do? New theatre of war. And he's trying to get the counterplay over on the c file. But the top move for me is carry out the plan. Let's swap off a knight for a bishop. So played. Computer likes queen takes. It's nearly, what would that be, 0.6, more than half a pawn difference. Second best f takes, without, to take back without damaging the pawn structure. But he damages his pawn structure, and now it's minus 1.5 to black. Not even any material up, but we've got doubled pawns and we've got the bishop pair. So little advantages, and we'll see if we can take them through. Okay, I castle. He castles. And that f-pawn push now has a rook behind it and a knight and 2 pawns. So it's an interesting one. But the computer would like me to take with the d pawn, opening up the queen. Well, I can see how that would be good. It's always interesting about removing the pawns from in front of your queen, but be removing the ones from in front of his, and it would make those pawns double isolated. So hindsight being what it is, I can truly see why d takes c5 is a superior move. B takes is threatening to force the same thing, but not quite as well. And h5 is allowing, all sorts of threats to happen with my dark bishop. But I played a5 with thoughts of, perhaps getting the light bishops off if need be, and getting some more counterplay over on that side myself. His best move there is c takes b6, which he's played. And strangely enough, c5 is the go here. I guess I can then take the b pawn at my leisure. And that does make a bit of sense, but I just took it directly. And now we're at 0.1 to white, so quite even. He brings a rook across. Now there's some positional posturing here, and this is no doubt going to come into what the computer says for how we played the middle game. Now I've brought the queen up to connect the rooks, as they say. He's made a battery, so he can now, well, not quite yet, but it's thinking about bringing the bishop can't come in here, but he can now play bishop to b5, threatening my queen. The queen can't take the bishop. But the queen stepped up to join the rooks, and it's not even one of the main choices, but I have, before he plays that move, join the rooks, and if the bishop comes here, the queen can step back and the rooks are still joined. That was my thinking. So, played as predicted, and queen to d8 is played. It was the best move, and it's 0.0. His best move is h4. That's interesting. And anything else, there's going to be an edge to me at black. He played the second best, getting a pair of rooks off. Funnily enough, rook takes rook. You'd think it'd be an obvious reply. Is it? I can take back that rook with a bishop, with a rook, with a queen, or with a knight. Taking back with the rook is the top move, minus 0.15. Taking with the bishop, minus 0.01. Taking with the queen is 0.00. Have a guess what the old mathematical KM took back with. You got it right, the knight. So how bad was that? As it thinks about it, it was saying 0.6 to white. Now it's back to 0.2. So not a whole lot in it. And the reason I've taken back with the knight is I'm thinking about bringing this knight across here just to invite that bishop to leave. And should it come in, then, well, there's fun and games and jumping around that can happen there. But he's thrown his d-pawn forward. And interesting that e takes, pawn takes back, is a small edge to black. And right now, queen to e7. Let's see, e7. That's interesting, getting ready to take back with the queen. There's a lot to be said for not locking it up, and this bishop is now far more powerful than it was mere seconds ago after that d-pawn went forward. But having said that, almost force of habit with the old hippo, locking up the centre, which has reduced the impact of my dark bishop. Wouldn't mind it here, wouldn't mind it, well, that's not so good. It's going to be most useful on h6. And it really can't get out over on the queen side at all. Which is, almost by design. After getting his dark bishop off much earlier with our first attacking plan, you may have noticed that the colour complex, our pawns are all on dark squares. Okay, so he's brought his rook across to add pressure, perhaps, to the knight. It's not threatening it yet. Taking the knight to where I was thinking, it's threatening the bishop. And it is interesting that monkeying around after bishop to a6, and then when the knight moves, wherever the knight moves, the bishop is then under threat by... actually, bishop to a6, and he's got it. I would probably go bishop to c8 and keeping the tension. Wonder how it would go with bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, knight, where's the knight going to go away to? Well, not there. But if I can move the knight somewhere, I could even move it here because the queen's being threatened by the rook. And then I could go somewhere with the knight. It would be fairly active. There'd be stuff happening. But he has gone back, was at the second best. Let's take a quick look. Bishop to d3 was the second best, and it's a quarter of a point to black. And then from there, well, the knight can't come back there, but it is covering that square. and that's covered by the pawns, and at some stage, if need be, there's knight to c8, which will protect the two back of the pawn chain pawns. So in some ways that knight's in a reasonable spot. Let's take a look at getting these rooks off. Okay, he's brought it forward. He's thinking about protecting his pawns, and we're both obviously thinking about what the endgame's going to look like and how we're going to fight it. Now I'm thinking getting 2 on 1 on the side, if I can get rid of that there, is not the worst thing. And it was the top move. And now it's better than -1/2 to black. So he does have, I mean, I do have the bishop pair, so the colour complexes, I can handle them both for his pawns, but he's got all those knights. And knights can be good, and this is getting a bit more closed, and I perhaps shouldn't have closed that up in the middle. And I'm starting to feel this at this time. I'm starting to think, gee, is it good that he's got all those knights? But let's take the queen here, threatening a hanging pawn. And you'll note that this pawn is also hanging, and I'm thinking about, it's a bit of half of a plan. If I can get the bishop threatening this one and the queen threatening this one, we'll see. His queen's come across. His queen is not only protecting what was hanging, it's adding pressure to my B pawn, which is only protected by my queen at the moment. So I send the H pawn forward. H4 could be a bit of a plan later if I want to move that knight along. But also it allows my bishop. Fair enough, I'm not going to be moving the H pawn forward. But we're now threatening that hanging pawn. How's white going to react to this? And we're up to, -1 to black here, so we're keeping the pressure up. So the king's got his own rusty sword, and he's come forward to protect that pawn. So we'll see how the play goes here. Queen forward. Now we have got bishop and queen on the hanging pawn. Queen takes would be fantastic. It would be check, the king would move, and then I would win a bishop. So I am giving my opponent chances to go wrong here. He's 100 points above me with rating, and he's unlikely to allow me to take that pawn with my queen. So how does he go about stopping it? I think that may have been the best move. Let's have a look for him. Knight to f1. So he's got a knight and the king. Double protection on that. Bishop to c8 is best. And then to d7. Basically getting this bishop into the action would be best. But I have gone with maybe a riskier plan. It's not in the top moves there. See what you think. It's not obviously a total blunder because, I mean, looking at it now, I could be going down a pawn. Because if he takes me, I take him. He takes me. And then I could bring the bishop down. The fight would go on, but I would lose a pawn. Or would I? Because after he takes that one, it's taken this defender away. I think there's a strong chance I'd take this pawn, either with the queen. There'd be a battery aimed at that knight, but there's pawn protecting it. I would potentially take that pawn there with the bishop, bringing it really into the action. But it would certainly be a lot of fun and games looks like computer likes it for white if he pulls that particular trigger. But it's certainly going to be on for young and old. But it's he takes, I take, he takes, and then maybe I take. So it's an exchange, and it certainly opens the game up. And at this point, I've still got the bishop pair and an open game. I would have thought it's going to be better for me. However, he didn't pull that particular trigger. He's rerouting that knight, and you'll see, should I find the right move, it's -1 to me. And you'll note that that pawn, and this is perhaps the thing that my opponent missed, is that his rearmost e-pawn is pinned to the king. So f4, and played, was definitely the move to go with. And now we start to see what he was thinking. He's brought the knight around to threaten the queen. But you'll see the key here is ignoring that, in a way, because f takes e is check. So we've removed that pawn, and we've got a pawn that is doubly protected at the moment, even though my queen's probably going to have to move in a minute. It's another chance for black to go wrong. And I can see that king to g1 would be a horrendous mistake, because it'd be a discovered check from the queen if the pawn went forward. I mean, I guess he could then take the queen, but I could get a new queen. It would be not fun. It would be -2 with king to g1. King to e1, not much better. His best move by more than a point of eval is king to e2, and he's played it. Which, apart from anything else, I now need to deal with the knight threat on my queen. And queen to c6, and I'm looking at, can I get my queen, I guess, in the, looks a bit like a rook swing, but a queen swing, and all the way around the locked up centre. And the first part of that is played. Now for him, knight times e3 is best. And I'm thinking this is fairly locked up. And depending on what you think of the result, and I did get on the scoreboard this time in the round robin, trying to make it more open and keeping the bishop pair may have been the go for playing for the win. But it's at this point, with most of my pawns on dark squares and him only with a bishop, thinking I can probably eventually get the queens off if I can get rid of the knights, then it's playing either for a draw, or if I can manage it, getting a pawn through, and maybe I've got a slightly better chance than him. So I've taken it. And it's still 0.2 to me, but certainly he's got less clever tricks with knights with only the one, and his light bishop is not going to be super useful against the majority of my pawns. So I've brought the queen across, thinking about if he lets me do it. Queen here, check. And then apart from anything else, I've got getting a pawn and then 2-on-1 and trying to get the pawns forward to get one through. He almost can't afford to let it happen. And queen to f2 was his best. It's interesting that bishop c8 is the best for me, but there's 0.01 in it. And I've gone with, let's get the queens off. And it really is starting to simplify. Let's bring the king. At the moment, and bringing that king, I'm wondering if it wasn't the best And I can see that before that pawn gets out there, if I get bishop c8 right now, that's a lot better for black than the next one along, because then that bishop to there, it really seals everything a lot more. Thought of it, but too late. What am I going to do here? This is starting in 2 weeks, school holidays here, teacher. And I've got Solomon Riddell's Mastering Endgames course, and I need to start learning the endgame. Anyway, here we go. As far as it's for what this is worth, I thought he's probably going to, but if he doesn't, and then take back, his king can't come through. Got check. Oh, by the way, bishop g4 check is best. He moves his king. The king can't get through here. I brought the bishop back. His knight's threatening both of the back of the pawn chain pawns. So knight to c8 covers them both. He moves his king. Now I'm thinking at this point that, you know, the fact that his knight can quite easily threaten those, if I can get rid of his knight, I can seal the barrier. Now that wasn't the best, and this will be worth taking a look at. Knight takes b6. Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense now we look at it. Because if I take back, then he wins the bishop. But I've got a knight and he's got a bishop, and I can see the advantage. But that was a little bit of a letting him in. That instead, okay, it's a lot easier to think about without that knight now. The knight's protecting the two pawns. And now the knight no longer needs to protect those pawns because they're on dark squares. The pawns are stopping the king coming here. The knight's stopping the king coming here. And the king can't come into either of those. He can threaten the h-pawn. When I had dreamt about that pawn forward and getting my king in behind, and that's not going to happen. My king has got to protect my h-pawn. And this is endgame course stuff. Look at those big numbers for white here. +5 with king c2. Will be worth tomorrow taking a look at how that line goes, and it's potentially one for Nivin to look at, but all of the opportunity's gone. So he had to move the king then, and moving that pawn forward ruins it. So 0.00 all over the show. And I offer to draw at this point because I can see my king not being able to leave that pawn, and for as long as his bishop's threatening the pawn, and while his bishop's threatening the pawn, I don't know, maybe what would have happened if he gets to there, he wouldn't do it because I'd take with this pawn, and then I'd have a passed pawn that could go through. And the draw was accepted at that point in time. Let's have a quick look at the review. Let's see. Oh, I outplayed my opponent by 0.2 in the accuracy. There you go. There's that moment at the end there. Bit hidden. 3 great moves to Nivin, 4 to me. No brilliancies. No blunders, and we both had a few misses. Both played at 1900. Outplayed by a little in the opening. I played a better middle game. And yeah, the end game, very little in that. And I was kind of playing for the draw towards the end when I wasn't trusting myself to prosecute the win. And that's what Solomon's Endgame course is for. But anyway, the mathematical game has hit the scoreboard in the round robin. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.